Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
This is Ralph Rennick. There's something magic about the number 1 million. Somehow it means the big time, stability. It generates enthusiasm for the future. The city of Miami is now the magic city with that magic number, a city with 1 million population. Tonight, we will trace the history of this city on Biscayne Bay from when it was nothing until it was something.
FYI. For your information, another in the series of special reports produced by WTVJ. Tonight's program, Miami Hits a Million, is brought to you by Federal Savings and Loan Association, who invites you to save where thousands save, and say as thousands say. For my money, it's Chase Federal.
Many Indian tribes inhabited Florida when the first explorers arrived to claim the peninsula as a Spanish New World colony. In 1567, the Jesuits established a mission at the mouth of the Miami River. It was later abandoned. It was General Andrew Jackson who conquered Florida for the United States in 1921. During the Seminole War, Major Francis L. Dade was massacred by Indians north of Tampa. A few weeks later, in 1836, the Territorial Legislative Council gave Dade's name to a newly created county, which took in the territory from the north end of Lake Okeechobee to the Keys. By 1860, the U.S. Census was able to list Dade County's population at 83. Not included were alligators upstream in the Miami River Rapids. A tin cup full of river water brought a crystal clear drink. This was the mouth of the river looking toward the bay. William Brickell had built a trading post on the south bank in 1870. Seminoles would paddle their dugouts from the Everglades to barter supplies. The trading post was Miami's first supermarket. The river, the superhighway of yesterday. The Brickell Mansion occupied the point on the south bank. On the north side of the river, tour boats and pleasure craft docked. The only way to cross the river was by boat. The Brickell Mansion still stands today, weather-beaten and unkept. William Brickell's daughter, Miss Maud, died here last year. Some people want to move the house and preserve it as a historic site. Miami's first tourists in 1884 stayed at Peacock Inn on the shores of the bay at Coconut Grove. Twin dressing rooms at Bay's Edge, one for gentlemen, the other for ladies, who completely covered their arms and legs before bathing. On the north side of the river, development slowly began, although you wouldn't guess it from this scene at Flagler Street in the Bay, 1895. E.L. Brady and Company sold grain and hay, among other things, in the first general store. This woman, Mrs. Julia Tuttle, had paid several visits to Miami prior to 1891, when she moved here after the death of her husband, a Cleveland Iron Works operator. She purchased 640 acres on the north bank of the river, the site of today's downtown Miami. Mrs. Tuttle set up housekeeping next to an old Army barracks, Fort Dallas, built in 1849. The so-called fort was later moved to a site in Lummis Park, where it remains today. The fort at one time was used to house Negro slaves. It later was utilized as Dade County's first courthouse. Julia Tuttle made this man a target. Henry Flagler had built a railroad as far south as West Palm Beach to bring tourists to his chain of luxury hotels in Florida. Mrs. Tuttle persuaded Flagler to extend his one-track line to Miami. As an inducement, she offered him half her land holdings. In April 1896, the tracks were completed. 300 people turned out to witness the first steam engine into town, connecting Miami with the rest of the nation. Across from the Brickell Trading Post, groundbreaking was held for the Flagler Royal Palm Hotel, the site now the location of the DuPont Plaza Hotel. 100 root the hammock land. Workers uncovered the historic Indian Mound, where Tequesta Indians had buried their dead. 50 or 60 skulls were uncovered, tossed into barrels, some later given away as souvenirs. On January 16, 1897, the Royal Palm opened its doors. Everyone who had the money and the right clothes attended the opening dinner. And this was Miami's first bona fide tourist season. Toward the end of the winter season, Miami residents were permitted to swim in the Royal Palm's pool for 15 cents during restricted hours. Miami now had its first newspaper, the Metropolis. This was Volume 1, Number 1, published May 15, 1896. From the newspaper office, the editor termed the city Marvelous Miami, the town with 1,000 souls, and the survey of the place not yet completed, the coming metropolis of South Florida. The coming metropolis it was. As Miami approached the turn of the century, citizens began demanding streets and other services. It was a struggle to obtain the 300 voters required by state law to incorporate as a city. But on July 28, 1896, an election created the city of Miami. At Christmas 1896, the downtown section was hit by fire, which destroyed many frame structures. 1898, the Spanish-American War. 7,000 soldiers dispatched to Miami. They marched on Miami Avenue at Flagler, past the old Frank T. Budge hardware store. Then yellow fever spread to the city, bringing 263 cases and 14 deaths. The city was quarantined for 3 months. In 1898, Miami was shocked with the sudden death of its mother, Julia Tuttle, from an unknown ailment. As the city hit the year 1900, business continued to expand. This is the Surprise Store at 78 East Flagler Street. Miami was again the county seat. In 1888, voters to the north had directed the county government be located at Juneau, north of Palm Beach. But the expanding South Dade population voted 10 years later to return the county seat to Miami. In 1904, a new county courthouse was built on the site of the present 28-story courthouse. It was a big event in 1908 when the first automobile to travel between Jacksonville and Miami pulled up to the Royal Palm Hotel. Travel time for the trip, 5 days, 8 hours. Flagler Street, then known as 12th Street, had seen nothing yet. The horseless carriage was about to do away with the horse. The old and new pictured before the First National Bank. The old and the new. The river now had a bridge at Miami Avenue. The Brickells were angry it wasn't built nearer the bay and nearer their property. The river was crowded with boats. Miami City Council was drawn into a court suit filed by the railroad against attorney George A. Worley and others who fought the FEC's ownership claim to Miami's bayfront property. The FEC erected a barbed wire fence to keep bathers from the water and, incidentally, to keep competitive merchant ships from unloading their cargoes. The court ruled that the plat for the area had the word park on it, and thus the land belonged to the people. And that was the beginning of Bayfront Park. The city filled in the area occupied previously by boats and piers to create the park. Flagler pushed his railroad south from Miami. Thousands of workers, recruited from all parts of the world, completed the impossible job of building a railroad over the water to Key West. The first train arrived in Key West in 1912. Miami grew as the Magic City. Elser Pier at the bay in Flagler was a leading spot. World War I brought a naval air station to Dinner Key. pilots took dive bomb training in the bay near the Royal Palm Hotel. But complaining guests forced the Navy to move the activity further south. This July 4th, 1918 baseball game in Royal Palm Park gave no evidence that a war was in progress. The McAllister Hotel began to rise near the bayfront. A flu epidemic took its toll of lives in Miami, and people prayed for the end of the war. In the early 1900s, Miamians could take a boat from the foot of Flagler to this pier at the south end of a mangrove island known as Miami Beach. Energetic John Collins had come from New Jersey before the turn of the century. Collins saw that most of the beach area, aside from a high sand ridge along the ocean, was covered with dense mangrove growth. But Collins did find an area west of Indian Creek, north of 28th Street, suitable for farming. He built this canal in order to boat his vegetables to Miami's port for shipment north. Collins was past 70 when he decided to build this wooden bridge linking the beach with Miami. It was this bridge which changed the history of Miami Beach. Collins spent $100,000, ran out of money, the bridge still unfinished. He then went to Carl Fisher in Miami, who retired with a fortune from Prestolite, the trade name for carbide gas headlights. Fisher loaned Collins $50,000 to finish the bridge. Collins gave Fisher 200 acres of Miami Beach land as a bonus. It was Fisher who built Indianapolis Speedway, who blazed the Lincoln and Dixie highways. He now turned his attention to the mangrove growths of Miami Beach. This is the pathway cleared for Lincoln Road. John Levi supervised hundreds of Negro hands as machetes slashed at the palmettos. Axes were put to the dense mangrove. It was summertime, the time of mosquitoes and sandflies and bright sun. Mules were brought in to tug at the stubborn palmetto and mangrove roots. The Lummis brothers were clearing the south end of the beach, while Fisher concentrated on the section from 15th to 21st Streets, the bay to the ocean. Workmen came across rattlesnakes, hundreds of raccoons, and rats by the thousands. The Lummis brothers advertised for cats and got them in bags. Let loose in the swamp, they cleaned out the rats. Soon the trees and underbrush were felled, and the giant dredges sucked up bay bottom and laid a blanket of sand atop the downed mangroves. Wooden bulkheads formed the edge of the island. Dredging operations ran day and night for 12 years. Fisher was to spend $6 million in creating his dream city. Trees were planted and foliage was brought in to keep the sand from blowing away. Fisher hired from Key West C.W. Pete Chase, Jr. to be his general sales manager. Chase at his Miami Beach home gives his impression of the boss.
He was a man of great foresight, and the spending of money made no difference to him. Everything he did it on a very big and very heavy scale. And Miami Beach is a monument to him, and on Alton Road at 61st Street, there's a monument to Carl Fisher now, and on that it states, he built a great and fabulous place out of a wilderness.
Here's some of the equipment used by Carl Fisher in transforming the swamp into the Riviera of the Americas. On New Year's Day, 1921, the new county causeway was opened to the beach. A $600,000 bond issue to build the link had been passed by a 2-to-1 vote. Now, streetcars brought people from Miami to the ocean. The Roman pool at 23rd Street saw its share of bathers. They came in all shapes and in all sizes. Fisher had an eye for publicity. Rosie the elephant made copy in northern newspapers. And so did President Harding when he played golf on Fisher's course, and famed auto driver Louis Chevrolet when he piloted a boat in the Biscayne Bay Regatta. Everybody was coming to Miami Beach. In the early 20s, people and ships and trains were arriving in Miami. In 1920, the city's population was just short of 30,000, a 440% increase in 10 years. The land boom was beginning. Old schooners were brought into service to handle the demand for bringing building materials to the city. Bathtubs were stacked on docks, destined for homes and fast-emerging subdivisions. Commuter boats brought baggage and passengers ashore from large Clyde Lines ships anchored off the beach. By 1925, the boom was in full swing. People flocked into the city by train, car, and boat. And they brought their savings with them. Everybody wanted to get rich in the Florida land boom. People sat on lawns. One visitor wrote, "Hatless, coatless men rushed about the blazing streets, their arms full of papers, perspiration pouring from their foreheads. Every shop seemed to be combined with a real estate office. At every doorway, crowds of young men were shouting and speech-making, thrusting forward papers, and proclaiming to have the unsurpassed chances they were offering to make a fortune." Everybody in Miami was real estate mad. 7,500 real estate licenses issued in 1925. This was Miami's skyline in May 1925. During that year, nearly 200,000 deeds and papers were filed by the county clerk. 481 hotels and apartments were built. And 1 year later, May 1926, Miami's skyline was transformed into a modern metropolis. The boom was like a fever. Buses carried people from downtown to view subdivisions. Strawberry patches and pineapple plantations became platted communities. 971 subdivisions were laid out on paper. Lots were sold at 10% down, resold several times again before the day was out. At Jackson Memorial Hospital, tents housed employees. The Ku Klux Klan paraded down Flagler Street and sang Christmas carols in county jail. The city manager reported, the Vice Squad, organized in September 1925, is continually busy with liquor raids and closing up disorderly houses. The congestion caused by automobiles was a headache for police. No parking tickets, though, were put on windshields. The cops hauled off the rear seats of offenders' cars to headquarters. To get your seat returned, you paid a fine. Biscayne Boulevard was built at a cost of $1 million a mile. Bayfront Park, dredged up by the city, was beginning to take shape. Venetian Causeway was open. The city planted small royal palm trees along the parking lanes of Biscayne Boulevard downtown. 800 steamers and sailing vessels entered the port of Miami in a 5-month period after the railroad was forced to put a freight embargo on shipment of building materials. The one rail track from Jacksonville to Miami was jammed with 1,200 cars of undistributed freight. This was the first house built in Miami Shores, a $62 million development of 2,500 acres. People wanted to have fun. The Miami Jockey Club was built by Joe Smoot on land way out in Hialeah. Dog racing and the Spanish game of Jai-Alai came on the scene. While crowds gathered at Hialeah for legalized betting on horses, people in other parts of town lived a wide-open life. Gambling was accelerated. Jewel thieves had a heyday. West of town in 1899 was this homestead occupied by the Merrick family. The son, George, hurried home from New York Law School in 1911 at his father's death in order to look after the grove. When Merrick began to subdivide and offer lots for sale, the bankers declined any backing since they thought the property was too far west of the city. But Merrick was a good businessman and a visionary master planner. Buses carried potential investors to his housing site. Merrick carefully platted a new city called Coral Gables. Spanish-style architecture was to be the theme. Stonemasons were imported from Cuba to build structures from native limestone. The Gables was known as the $100 million development. Salesmen in New York and Chicago did business in lavish Spanish-style offices. Merrick cut a canal to Biscayne Bay to provide waterway home sites. He gave 160 acres to establish the University of Miami. Merrick's high standards for his city were never violated. He alone was responsible for Coral Gables. William Jennings Bryan, who conducted on Sundays the largest outdoor Bible class in the world in Miami's Royal Palm Park, spent weekdays spellbinding potential land buyers in Coral Gables at a salary of $100,000 a year. Bryan held court at the Venetian Pool, a rock pit converted into a fantastic water paradise. Olympic diving champion Pete Desjardins was hired to demonstrate the proper use of the high board. At the new Coral Gables Country Club, Jan Garber and his orchestra made many a heart flutter by playing When the Moon Shines in Coral Gables. In Miami, the fast turnover in real estate had nearly bulged the walls in the county clerk's offices. Construction was started on a new courthouse. The grand jury and bar association formally demanded a new building, and the county began a 28-story structure built around the old courthouse so as not to disturb the business of government. On September 6, 1928, the new building was completed, the old having now been demolished. But the urgent need for the enlarged courthouse had diminished. The boom was over. The boom bubble did not burst overnight. The banks and northern investors began to stiffen up on money. Fraudulent promotions were revealed by the Better Business Bureau. The stock market declined. The Danish naval training ship was one thing which triggered the bust. Brought to Miami to be outfitted as a floating hotel, the barkentine Prince Valdemar overturned in the main ship channel January 10, 1926, as it was being towed to Miami Beach from Miami. For nearly a month, the 241-foot-long barrier blocked the port. No ship could enter the harbor. The resultant lack of construction materials slowed down the hectic building pace. But the clincher for the bust came on the 17th of September, when ominous dark clouds moved in on the Florida coast. Raging seas and high winds hit the city shortly after midnight, September 18th. For more than 12 hours, the hurricane lashed at Miami. 113 people were killed, and the Magic City was anything but a wonderland. 140 boats went aground, some in Bayfront Park. 2,000 homes destroyed, 3,600 damaged. The hurricane blew away the tinsel. It created a challenge met by the real leadership of the town. Those lured here by the easy money of the hectic boom days left. Miami still had one asset nothing could affect, its climate. Moreover, the foundation of the city had been well laid. People would still come to Miami. The city would always draw residents from other places. When the debris of the hurricane was cleared, when Miami was back on its feet, nothing could stop its destiny. The people continued to come, the city continued to grow. Until today, the greater Miami area has reached the magic number 1 million permanent residents. In terms of age, Miami in 1962 can be termed a sophomore when compared with older cities of a million. But this area, 15th largest metropolitan sector in the nation, is well directing its youthful enthusiasm. A modern expressway system is taking shape, and plans have just been approved to extend this superhighway system. The University of Miami continues to gain stature as a leading educational institution of higher learning. This barren wilderness in the southern end of the county is the site of the giant Aerojet General moon rocket plant. As more selected industry continues to move to greater Miami, more people coming here will find more jobs and greater stability in the economy. We still play host to the world as the #1 tourist area on the globe. More and more permanent residents push the city into the suburbs. The growth in Miami has been fantastic. Future prospects for the area are unlimited. The sun has always shone on this magic city. We're 1 million today. The planners predict we'll be 2.5 million by 1985, just a few chapters away in Miami's history book. As we hit 1 million and look around us and still think of what's to come, we can say with honesty, isn't it great to live in Miami? Good night.
Miami hits 1 million, another in the series of FYI programs for your information, has been brought to you by Chase Federal Savings, with 5 convenient offices to serve you. Why don't you join the thousands who say, for my money, it's Chase Federal. Tonight's program was written and narrated by Ralph Rennick. Photography by Lloyd Beckworth and Gordon Stevens. Film editor Joe Martinez. Produced by WTVJ News. Special thanks for supplying special material to G.W. Romer, the Historical Association of South Florida, Hialeah Race Course, C.W. Chase Jr., Mrs. Nils Anderson, and the Miami Public Library. This program is directed by Martin Saxon.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.